Some pretty shocking news in the metal world this weekend when it was announced that after 12 years and 4 studio albums together, arch enemy and vocalist Alissa White-Gluz have parted ways. Both Alissa and the band issued separate statements about the split, although no reason was cited, but here's what the band had to say. Arch enemy have parted ways with singer Alissa White-Gluz. We're thankful for the time and music we've shared and wish her all the best. Wherever there is an ending, there is also a beginning. See you in 2026. Alissa also had her own statement where she said, after 12 years in arch enemy, we have parted ways. I am forever thankful to the thousands of amazing fans I have met along the way. Thank you, Beastlings. I can't wait to share what I have been working on with you all, with some big surprises in store. Stay tuned for big news in 2026 and see you very soon. Again, no reason for the split was given, but I gotta say myself, and I think almost everybody else, I mean, this is quite shocking news, especially when you consider the fact that the band just finished their Blood Dynasty European tour like maybe a week and a half ago or so. Gotta wonder if this is something that's been planned for some time or if something happened rather recently to cause the two to part ways. Either way, this is most certainly pretty damn surprising. I should also point out too that it does seem that all parties have unfollowed each other on Instagram. Obviously, that is not the de facto indicator that the split was not on the greatest of terms, but for example, arch enemy does still follow Jeff Loomis, who, of course, is no longer in the band, so take that for what you will. Also, as you probably know, Jeff Loomis just recently reactivated Nevermore, and I think next year they're going to play their first live shows in quite some time. They have not yet announced who will be handling vocals for that. A lot of people saying, well, wouldn't it be quite a turn of events if Alissa was the new singer of Nevermore? So the likelihood of that, I don't know. I think maybe some people are just saying that as a goof, but who knows? Nowadays, anything is possible, so we'll see what happens. We don't have to wait that much longer for Nevermore to make their return to the stage. And I assume Alissa's big news, at least in part, is the announcement of her upcoming debut solo album. That announcement came just after she announced that she was no longer a part of Arch Enemy. And alongside the announcement of the album, she also released the first single from the record called The Room Where She Died, along with an accompanying video, which I'll put a link to down below. And it also appears that for her upcoming solo project, she is just going under the name Alissa. She is not using her full name, but that's really all that we know so far about this upcoming solo project. And whether or not this is part of the big news that she teased for 2026, that remains to be seen. However, at least for this new song, The Room Where She Died, that song was co-written with Alissa alongside Oliver Palotai, if I'm saying that correctly. If you don't know him, he plays the keys and some guitars. He's been a member of Camelot for about 20 years now. Oliver's also in the video for The Room Where She Died, and he also co-wrote the song with Alissa. Probably plays on it too, I would imagine. And at some point, I'm sure we'll find out if he has any further involvement with Alissa's new solo venture. We'll see if he's involved with the next single from her solo project, assuming that one gets released ahead of the full album dropping, whenever that is. So that is what we know so far regarding Alissa's future, but of course, all of this obviously begs the question that literally everyone is asking, which is, who will Arch Enemy replace Alissa with? Of course, they already have, or at the very least are working on plans for 2026, as they alluded to in their statement, but the big question really is, will they get a new to Arch Enemy replacement for Alissa, or will they go back to somebody from their past? Of course, Alissa was the third vocalist that they've had over the years. Obviously, Alissa is a phenomenal vocalist. She was with Arch Enemy for over a decade, the Agonist before that. She's got a ton of fans on her own, plenty of longtime Arch Enemy fans that liked her in the band as well. But there was always a portion of Arch Enemy fans that would love to see the return of the band's quote-unquote classic vocalist, Angela Gossow. Obviously, there's no bad blood between Angela and Arch Enemy, because if you don't know, Angela has not only managed the band since she stepped down from handling vocals, but she is also the one who suggested that Alissa take over for her on vocals. So obviously it goes without saying that Angela is still a huge part of Arch Enemy, just now in a behind the scenes kind of way. She also manages a handful of other bands as well. It's not just Arch Enemy. But musically, I don't really think she's done much outside of some guest appearances here and there since she stepped down as the vocalist for Arch Enemy, which I believe that was to spend more time with her family and also explore some other interests that she has. So given that, I really think Angela returning to the band is sort of a 50-50 shot shot. I mean, it really could go either way. I think in one way, you could look at it as obviously she stepped down as vocalist for a reason. It's been over a decade now. She hasn't really done much musically at all since then, so it will probably stay that way. But you could also look at the other side of the coin, which, hey, it's been over a decade. Maybe she is ready to come out of, quote unquote, performance retirement, make her grand return to the stage. And what better time than now, since Alissa is no longer a part of the band. And look, I love Alissa's vocals, loved her in Arch Enemy, but it really is hard to deny the fact that Angela returning to Arch Enemy would just be super badass, quite a monumental moment in metal, to say the very least. And it could potentially even elevate Arch Enemy to new heights. I mean, we see all the time what any sort of quote-unquote reunion can do for any band in terms of business and ticket sales and all that kind of stuff. So needless to say, it would absolutely be huge. I would love to see Angela return. I think it would be a great thing for the band, but I really am 50-50 on the likelihood of that happening. But the other wishful quote-unquote reunion that a lot of longtime fans, especially of Arch Enemy, are clamoring to see would be the return of the band's original vocalist, Johan Liiva, who of course is also the band's only male vocalist that they've ever had. He appeared on their first 3 albums and left the band in 2000. I believe he was fired, if I recall, but there was a sort of pseudo reunion between 2016 and 2019 where the original Arch Enemy lineup reunited as Black Earth. They did a bit of touring, performing songs from the first 3 Arch Enemy albums. And aside from Arch Enemy, he has had a few other projects since he left the band now over 25 years ago. He had the band Hearse. There was also a band called Non-Exist, but certainly nothing comes anywhere near Arch Enemy in terms of notoriety. And while it would be cool to see him make his return to Arch Enemy after all these years, to me at least, it feels rather unlikely. Whether the new vocalist turns out to be Angela or somebody else, I do feel like it will be a female that continues to take on that role within Arch Enemy. Though I guess, on the other hand, most people are probably expecting it to be a female. So hypothetically, they could just throw a total curveball and get a male vocalist. But I don't know. I really just don't see that happening. Cool as it would be to have Johan back in the band after all these years or something like that. But I don't know. I just feel like another female vocalist is the obvious choice and probably the route that they will go. But between Johan and Angela, my money is on Angela, though, of course, again, I think it's a 50-50 shot. But I also think there's a fair chance they could go for a quote-unquote unknown vocalist or, somebody that's not necessarily a quote-unquote household name within metal. Starting over, if you got a unknown vocalist or whatever you want to call it, that can certainly be difficult and a bit like starting over when you are 30 years into your career now. Hopefully, though, we will get some answers on that soon, as well as what the future holds for Alissa White-Gluz. I will say, if going solo is her main focus moving forward, solo projects can, tend to be hit or miss, but I do really see it panning out for her as long as the material is worthwhile, of course. But she really has become so well known over the years. Quite a prominent figure. I mean, obviously not exactly mainstream or something like that, but still, she's all over the place. Most people in the world of metal know exactly who she is. I do think that she is capable of having quite a fruitful solo career. So we'll have to see what happens, but let me know your thoughts on who will replace Alissa in Arch Enemy down in the comments. But that is all that I got for you for right now. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to drop a like, subscribe below if you feel like it, and I'll see you next time.